right, hello everyone. I'm Dave Klein, Director, Cyber Evangelist for Cymulate. I have about 20 plus years in cybersecurity, been in it for a long time. A lot of incident response work throughout those years. After 9/11, I'm from the city of Philadelphia, but every day I would get on a high-speed train and go to New York City and help them shore up cybersecurity after the attacks. Spent about 4 years doing that and 10 years doing U.S. federal work. So back to that IR, a lot of really interesting things, especially about the topic today, getting offensive, continuous security validation and role in protecting against APTs and financial attackers. Yes, so especially with the federal experience, a lot of experience with APT, nation state actors and things like that. And something I find very fascinating. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's talk a little bit about getting offensive with against APTs and financial attackers. So we look at the challenges today, especially the last few weeks, with all the cases of ransomware against the U.S. pipeline shutting down energy on the eastern seaboard, the Global Food Corporation, Fujitsu, among others. It's really quite a scary situation. And organizations spend about $100 billion annually, but there's still critical questions that don't really seem to be answered. And it comes from both I'd argue, an executive CISO kind of business perspective, as well as a technical one. And the idea is too often we're making assumptions. We're not really coming up with facts to back ourselves up. And so when you look at these, it really falls down again into a business line of questions of technical. From the business perspective, there are really kind of four things that come to mind. One is CISOs feel challenged in saying, I'm providing a lot of value for the spend that we do in cybersecurity. I'm proving that our investment is well spent. I'm reducing vendor crawl and other things to make things easier. I'm conveying risk effectively to not only my staff, but to the executives and the board. And I'm proving value by reducing risk. And of course, the big question that they get from the board all the time is, how are we doing against ransomware? How are we doing against nation state attacks and espionage? Will we survive if an attack occurs? And you look from beyond the business to the technical side of the house. And a technical leader has a lot of the same questions, but in a different kind of mindset. They're saying, I have all these security controls. We've made this investment. How do I make sure they're optimized, that we don't have any gaps, any places of concern? And not just the security controls, but the people that I have, right? The idea is there's a whole problem with finding talented cybersecurity resources. So how do I take advantage of the people I have and educate them on the spot and as they go and make sure they're doing the best job they can? And I have IR plans. Do they work? Will they be effective when there's an attack? Things like that. And they also worry about reducing the sprawl of number of different cybersecurity tools that they use. Is there anything I can get rid of? And the idea also is, how do I protect myself against APTs and financial attackers? So when we look at this problem, we've had several traditional ways of going after this. We talk about vulnerability scanners, we talk about doing red teaming exercises and manual pen testing. But the challenge with these three types of techniques are they're merely a snapshot in time, taking a picture of your enterprise at one point. And the challenges there, beyond being just a snapshot in time and only periodical, is they're very resource intensive. And there's several challenges today that make this kind of snapshot a real problem. To start, when you look at the terrain, both from an enterprise perspective and from an attacker's perspective, both parties are being driven by digital innovation, where change is constant. And from that perspective, what I mean is, on the enterprise side of the house, they have adapted to business demands by coming up with a DevOps model where they use, scripting, whether it's Chef, Puppet, Ansible. With a single mouse click, I could push out 1,000 VMs. I could spin up a whole AWS environment. I could spin up a whole infrastructure with just a few clicks. I'm integrated with all my third-party partners and vendors, and I often consume things as a service. So basically, things happen quickly and fast. So the idea of having a snapshot is really not helpful, because 1 or 2 seconds later, maybe a change that you're not going to see after that snapshot. And looking at the threat actors, and we're going to examine this a little closer, they're evolving daily. right? They're getting the maximum effectiveness possible and maximum profits by doing several things. And from their perspective, what they do recently, there's really about three things that they're doing. One is they're automating these attacks. The idea is when an attack occurs, several steps of those kill chains are automated, not just sending out the spear phishing email that someone clicks on and goes to a URL, but once that malware is downloaded and talks to the CNC server, there's a whole series of steps that occur, from wiping up the evidence behind them, from spreading, from creating backdoors, creating new phantom accounts, and beginning to move laterally, that occur without any human intervention. The idea is they go deep in a single shot. So that's automation. They're also using chaining, which is that part of that automation. The idea of I want to get in deep as possible without anyone seeing me, and then have a person come to view and start managing the attack. And finally, they orchestrate so they hit their victims at one time. So the idea is in the morning, if one person gets hit, everyone gets hit. So it's not like you have a warning that something's coming. They want to be able to have a surprise attack across a whole wide array of enterprises at one shot. So the idea is between enterprises and threat actors, this is, change is constant. Let's talk a little more about those threat actors for a second. So we talk about them using three things to really dive deep and across and be effective. So many people are familiar with this Microsoft Exchange attack that occurred a few months ago. It took advantage of 4 CVEs, vulnerabilities. And again, it kind of fits the model I'm talking about. The idea is you see here in blue, that chaining concept. The idea is from the first malicious payload, requesting across authentication to the Exchange server, taking advantage of the other vulnerabilities, writing malicious file to any path, escalating privileges, dropping web shells, running commands. All this occurs before there is a man or woman on that mouse, right, in the back end here. That's a good example of this automation chaining. And the idea also, it's coordinated. They went after about 30,000 accounts at one time. They took their time, found where they all were, and then launched the attack at one time. Another thing that was kind of fascinating with this is once they made this attack, because it became known in the wild, you also found the financial actors who do ransomware and other types of APT players taking advantage of the same vulnerabilities that were put into play. So not only did you have all sorts of people being compromised by a single actor, you had other ones come in and say, oh, like blood in the water with sharks. The other APTs, financial actors came in and also took advantage of that. So this is what we're dealing with. We talk about digital innovation and criminals. Then here's an example of a root ransomware, right? And it's the same kind of thing. You see all sorts of movement in the first part that is automated and chained so that it dives deep even before there's a human on keyboard and mouse. And it comes in after it starts performing lateral movement and discovering other things. They come into play when they start to try to exfil data. Because right now with this ransomware, they're not just locking your file system, they're stealing your proprietary information to also blackmail you with that as well. And so the idea is about at that point when it becomes manual and people get involved. So the key there is it's a good example from the ransomware perspective. So back to what we talked about is because a snapshot in time is no longer effective in this situation, it leads to several challenges, right? The idea is you see over here on the left side of the screen, you have a pen test, you have a result. Well, that's great, but then everything else is still cloudy because things change so much quicker now, right? You have new desktop images pushed out to 10,000 machines. A new third-party vendor ties to your environment. A new ransomware in the wild takes advantage of new exploits, new Microsoft vulnerabilities. All these different things mean it's very difficult to have a single snapshot. You need to have something that is continuous, that you can run in an automated fashion over time. And instead of having a result, you have a baseline that trends up and trends down over time. So you know what's going on. So in this concept here of continuous security validation, it's really a 4-step process, right? You're using simulated attacks, real attacks, but simulated to be safe in your environment to see what's going on, right? And see if they can get through your security controls, if they get through your people, they get through the way your incident response plans work. Number 2, once you find where those gaps, those vulnerabilities are, you work to fix them, right? By optimizing the environment. Then you sit there and say, okay, now I can rationalize and say, wow, this has really worked out well. I have everything covered. Is there something I can get rid of that was overlap? Or is there something I need additionally to protect myself? And then you're able to rationalize spend and risk to your executives. And then you assure changes over time as again, the enterprise changes and the attackers changes, right? So the idea is it's a continuous circle in making things work. And again, it's not just your technology, it's your people and your IR plans as well. So back to what was cloudy before, now you could see, right? So the idea is you start at the beginning with continuous validation. If you have the ability to go over time, like you do with my solution, for example, Cymulate, you have all these changes that occur in the environment, whether it's the attackers or your enterprise, and you're able to make and fix things as you go and have the trend of risk go down over time versus the unknown. And this is again done by continuous security validation. And how does that work in the real world? Well, there's solutions like ours that are called breach attack simulation, as well as purple teaming, which we have both. And this allows you to very easily go through, simulate these attacks into your environment, wherever your environment is, and go ahead and interact with all your security controls. So it's not just being able to test the environment coming back with results. We come back with results, plus all the details that we gather from all the various things you have, from SOAR, SIM, your GRC, your EDR, your vulnerability management solutions. We bring it back into our solutions so you get a full picture of what's going on over time and trending up and trending down. So you can really go ahead and know what your security posture, visibility, and validation are. You know that your security controls and processes and people are optimized. You're able to really make a risk-based assessment of what needs to be fixed in your environment first, and also convey this risk management. And it really is great. And then what's most important is you're given remediation guidelines, prescriptive ways to go after things in your environment. So with continuous security validation, you can do all those questions that we had in the beginning. You can provide value for the spend, provide risk effectively and accurately. You provide value by reducing risk and optimizing security. You are optimizing your security controls, your IR plans, and your people. All that is optimized. And so, for example, us, Cymulate, we do this continuous security validation, and we map it to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So it's very easy to see where things are. It's SaaS-based, modular, deploys in under an hour. So it's really lightweight, safe, effective. It's most comprehensive out of the box as far as all the things that we cover. It's highly customizable. And production safe. So the concept is we make it possible to be able to run this in a continuous security validation fashion. In fact, there's a great report by Frost and Sullivan that you can get that looked at breach attack simulation vendors and found us to be #1 in innovation and #2 in business development. And that's great for us, as well as we won their best practices award across the whole study as well. I'm gonna go into some customer use cases, some real world examples, and we can go take a look at this here, how different customers have solved problems with continuous security validation. So the first one is Nemours Children's Health Systems. Jim Lovelace is the CISO, and they're a healthcare provider, and they were looking to shore up gaps, misconfigurations, and vulnerabilities within their existing security controls. So they turned to us, and on top of that, with COVID, with them working remotely, they were very concerned about what that would do to their environment. So #1, with us, they were better able to optimize their security controls. And for example, there was one policy change that prevented 168 exploits per being run in their environment. And then back to that whole COVID being remote situation, they were able, for the first time, to easily run a purple team exercise. And they said, we're going to pretend that someone has compromised someone's home machine, and they're on a VPN. They're inside our environment. And from inside our environment, what can they do? What can they do when they're past all our border protection and now inside? They were able to run a series of purple team exercises, and they were able to make changes to make sure that remote access was secured. So they gave them a lot of confidence in handling things even under the situation with the pandemic. Another company, Freeport LNG. Freeport is going to be the largest liquid natural gas distributor and pipeline in the United States when it goes live, I think, in a few months. And being who they are, as we saw with the pipeline attack on the East Coast last week, they're concerned about being critical infrastructure and concerned about APTs trying to take them out. So they have a very small team. You have Todd over here, who's the Chief Information Security Officer, and 2 other individuals. And the whole team makes up the SOC, the incident response team, and the red teamers. So they really wanted to replace their homegrown solution. They were able to code themselves and research breaches and attacks and create their own red teaming, purple teaming exercises. But the challenge is they also had to manage all the security and the SOC and the IR. So it was becoming too arduous. They came to us, and the beautiful thing is with us, because we automate the whole framework of purple teaming, we were able to help them really do it on a continuous basis and fix gaps and things in a quicker fashion, usually within 48 hours, especially even when new threats occur, because we update our solution every day. They knew, oh, there's new ransomware out there. Cymulate's already been updated. We've already tested in the environment, we're safe. So the key is we were able to take something that was really a quarterly exercise and make it continuous. And they were very, very thankful for that. Finally, we have a major global bank, and their first major concern was their aging ATM infrastructure. And they had both Windows XP and Windows 7 ATM machines. I know that sounds creepy, but that's what they had. And they had approached their management, said, we really want to get rid of these. And they said, well, I'm not sure we can. They were able to use us in a purple teaming exercise and show that they were able to shore up Windows 7 with external and internal controls, but that Windows XP, they couldn't make it safe enough. So they were able to justify getting rid of the Windows XP side of the house by proving the risk and able to shore up their Windows 7 machines, ATM machines. And then also they used us to test for a new EDR solution that they added to the solution. And they also do purple teaming like the prior customer. And we saved them over 50% on weekly costs of doing red teaming by having us use us. There's also, if you go to our website, a 2020 customer usage report, which is actually all our customers across all verticals. And what's beautiful here, and when I joined in January, this was very exciting to see, was all our customers use us in a continuous security validation fashion. They use us daily, all our customers. On top of that, regardless of where they are on the maturity level of cybersecurity, meaning if they're kind of in the beginning or they're top-notch cybersecurity professionals, everyone tests us against the latest threats. So it means even the beginners have enough information to test against ransomware and new threats and new APT threats, as well as the people who have a lot of experience. So they all test against all the latest threats and even more advanced ones. And the customers who use us more improved more. So it's a great study. You could download it there. So I was going to give a demo, but before I go to a demo, we want to turn it over for questions. So Jason, checking out with the audience to see what those questions are.
Yes, indeed. And we do have some questions coming in. So let's go. First one I'm actually going to take from the chat. I've managed to get here. I caught it before it got too lost. What's your thoughts on sort of threats that are stealth in nature, meaning they are dormant until somehow activated? Snapshot at a point in time might give the all clear.
So that's a great question. And so one of the things that we do in testing and doing breach attack simulation is we do things like delays, like waiting for an end user to click. And in fact, if we have time for the demo, I will show you an example of something that's waiting. But the idea is that has to be built into the testing. It is things that delay, things that wait for an end user to be solicited and click on something. And then there's also other ways of being stealthy, fileless systems, all sorts of other techniques that you can use. And that's also part of what we do. And that's really important to also test on those. Great question.
Thank you very much. I want to hear, based on history, I'm seeing more and bigger impacts on the IoT devices than traditional IT devices.
Yes.
What do Cymulate offer to protect the IoT devices like PLCs, HMIs, and other vulnerable OS systems?
That's a great question. So currently what we focus on is your infrastructure from premises to clouds, from virtual instances, bare metal, to containers. What we would play into is the last hop before you got to the actual controls, right? Some of the controls are Linux-based or Windows-based. We talked about the ATMs, for example, is that. But for the devices that are truly like PLCs or other types of true, SCADA controls, we would be at the last hop right before the server before you got there. As you know, most of those controls run Telnet, FTP, TFTP, very terrible protocols. And the last hop is usually a server, right? So that's where we come into play in checking those devices.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much. How different is Cymulate from a continuous monitoring tool?
So it's very different. So the idea with continuous security validation is you're doing, and we'll show this in the demo, you're going across the kill chain as a real threat actor would in a safe fashion. And every day you're getting updates to the newest threats, behavioral threats and toolkits and things like that. So the idea is it's more thorough in trying to go across. It's not like we're a red teamer who will try one technique or a few techniques to get through to the next level. We'll try all of them at each level, right? To see if we can rattle the doors and get through. And even if we're stopped, we can even continue to say, well, if we weren't stopped here, what would happen if we continue? So the concept is you're really getting a better impression in time of here's the gaps and misconfigurations and vulnerabilities that'll lead to threat. And you get an idea of if that threat is imminent or not imminent and what you could do to fix it. So it's more prescriptive than really continuous security monitoring. At the same time, you're also seeing how your platforms, your other platforms are functioning. So the concept is not only are you seeing if we're effective, we're seeing if the platforms, if they didn't block it, what details do they have about the attack, or do they have details? So a lot of times we're used in fine-tuning things like SIMs and also things like your SOAR platforms to see if they're responding in an appropriate fashion.
Thank you very much, Dave.
No.
John says we have an external team come 2 times a year to review the security, but is that enough? How do we make sure my environment is safe from external attacks as the technology is rapidly changing and the type of attacks are always changing?
So I think in that question, you hear some of the problems of what 2 times a year mean, right? 2 times a year mean a snapshot in time. And again, when so many of us, Jason, are using software as a service, right? My accounting package is as a service. My salespeople use Salesforce.com. My HVAC systems are now controlled by a third party who are inside my network. My elevators, my cameras. The fact is there's so much that interconnect into our environment today, and it's so complex and that you can change it all the time. That's one challenge. And then the other challenge, as I talked about before, is the attackers change all the time. They're constantly perfecting what they do. They collaborate together. They're on the darknet together. They're doing great work in a bad way. But the key is that, so therefore, a snapshot in time is not enough. It used to be enough, but not anymore. So the idea is being able to continue security validation is a way for you to by the time that the people come twice a year, which is probably for some certification or audits or your insurance, the point is you're taking care of things as you go along, and you're probably going to do better on those twice a year audits as well. So it really is it's a much better way of doing it.
Fantastic. A couple more, and then we can jump to the demo. How different is this from the deception technology tools?
So I actually came from a company that used to do dynamic deception. I love deception. And the key differentiator here is we're going through the entire kill chain. And if you have deception in your environment, you may actually catch our attack as we move laterally in that deception environment. So in a way, we can also perfect your dynamic deception or your regular deception techniques, right? It might be a situation where we come into the environment and instead of going to the email server, we're in a TiVo email server. And so therefore, we can help you see if it's running effectively, or you may find we run in the environment and we don't end up in the dynamic deception sandbox. You go, I need to tweak this. I need to tweak this. When there's an attachment on an email, it has to go here versus here. So it can be used to help you operationalize those dynamic deception environments as well. Great question.
Excellent. Well, there's another great question here. Can you talk about your recent $45 million fundraise in Series C funding for continuous security testing? Would this help drive cloud transformation initiatives from security standpoint?
So yes, and it really will. And one of the things we've done a lot recently is add a lot of cloud to cloud specific, things that check out your CSPM and things like that into our solution as well. And that's important, right? Because the idea is everything's going to cloud, and you hear all the times, EC2 buckets left in read-write permissions open. The idea of images being spun up without a key, just a password 123, all sorts of ways that things get spun up. So we've done a lot with Cloud Initiative. Also, what we've done is also tie this into DevOps, right? A shift left process. So you'll be seeing as we go into future weeks and DEF CON, I don't want to steal thunder from the announcement at DEF CON, but the idea of also incorporating us into rolling out images, right? And in the pipeline, and the idea of being able to say like, okay, we have an image, a candidate image, let's run attacks against it. Now the score was too bad. Let's put it back into development, fix those problems, and bring them back again. So the idea is we're also not only working on cloud initiatives, but ways that we could shift left and be part of the solution of fixing things before they're pushed out. Great question. Excited by the seed funding, by the way.
Great answer. Thank you very much. All right, well, we've got more questions, but we've got time to jump into the demo, then come back to these questions. So
sure.
Free to go ahead and share your screen again then, Dave.
And this is really just a quick little demo here. And let me just log in. Sign in. Perfect. So what we're looking at here is the Cymulate dashboard to the Cymulate solution. Again, this is breach attack simulation, as well as purple teaming. And what you see on the main screen is a group of our modules, and they're aligned like the kill chain, right? So the idea of going from left to right, people start by doing recon in environments, and this is kind of important to understand about how comprehensive we are. We're not just looking at security controls. I talked about the people, your processes, your incident response plans. You have recon, the ability of looking at the darknet and the internet for your user information out on the web, your passwords, infrastructure, things like that. So the idea of going out there to see what attackers may look for to try to attack you. And then beyond normal security controls, you have phishing awareness. So the idea of also being able to run phishing campaigns, and not just your techies, but your business staff, being able to go out and see how they would, if they click on things they shouldn't click on and things like that, and educate them. Then you have kind of your traditional perimeter, right? Everything from email gateway to web gateway to your application servers and your web application firewalls to see when things come in that way, as well as your endpoint security, lateral movement as it spreads across the environment, see if we can get data out of the environment. And then we have these things here, and I'll talk about these in a second, but I want to also talk about the scores. And the idea is these are like golf scores, the lower the score, the better, right? And these are trends over time. So as you run this multiple times, you'll see plus and minus and things like that. The goal here is continuous security validation. So you'll see, for example, we talked about you might push out a new desktop image, and that image opens all sorts of vulnerabilities. You might see your endpoint security go way up in problems, right? Because there's new things you need to take advantage of and lock down and things like that. So the idea is these change over time. Beyond the individual modules, we talked about being able to do purple teaming, and there's two other things. There's a thing called full kill chain and immediate threats. What these do, if you think about these being at various modules at various stages of attack, these simulate full attacks. They start at the beginning and go across all the modules to simulate certain things. And there's really two things here. There's immediate threats and full kill chain. Immediate threats, which is important. The whole title of this webinar is talking about APTs and FINs. So what we do is on a day-to-day basis, we go through and we look at see if this new actor has a new technique, a new behavior, a new toolkit, a new way of doing things. So last week, the person that was really famous was DarkSide, right? And DarkSide went out there and did a bunch of things, take down a pipeline. So you can see we've been tracking them for a long time and have added behavioral things and tools along the way to test your environment against them, right? And this is true for all sorts of things. So when the board asks you, hey, are we safe against ransomware? Are we safe against things like DarkSide attacks? If we're an energy provider, you can go ahead and do this right away. So that's what that is. So beyond immediate threats in full kill chain, I'm going to actually do a full kill chain example in the demo. There's also the purple teaming. And the idea here is whether you're a beginner, it allows you to run these things and know what you're doing. If you're an expert, instead of researching and make sure things are safe and doing change control windows, we do all that for you. So all you have to do is run it, and we create basically a framework for you to make it easily automated. So I wanted to go ahead, and since we're talking about APTs and fins today, I wanted to go ahead and run a full kill chain attack. And again, the idea is this goes through the whole environment. And the one in particular I wanted to look for is Fin8. Fin8's been around for quite a while. They've been around since 2016. And they're kind of interesting. They are, well, actually, they're very interesting. And basically, they were big in going after credit cards and hospitality and also restaurants. So things like Red Robin, Chili's, Arby's, Omni Hotel, Saks Fifth Avenue. They were very good at getting into these environments, finding the cash registers, which, surprise, surprise, are often Windows XP or Windows 7, and stealing all the credit card information. And a lot of different people have done research on them and stuff like that. And they disappeared for a while, and they came back in 2018. And they came about recently as March, and they collaborate a lot with Rook, which is ransomware. So they do things on credit card fraud and things like that. But they also often, to make extra money, go, hey, Rook, we got someone who you might want to attack, right? So they cover not only credit card fraud, but they actually get into ransomware. So in this case here, I want to go ahead and look across my environment, across the whole kill chain, because I want to see if my solution is optimized. So I'm going to go ahead and create this template, and you could run it with an agent to do the attacks, or agentlessly. This is one of the things you could decide. And then you could say, well, how do I want the initial attack to be launched? Do I want to have a downloadable link that I send via Slack, email with link, email attachment, things like that? Different ways of I'm going to say attachment to give the attack. So since I said attachment, I'm going to say, you know what? I really love how you see a lot with the Russians, word macros. Yeah, okay, I'm going to do an infected doc, right? And I'm going to go ahead and how am I going to compile this and use this? I'm going to do this with PowerShell inject, right? And I'm also going to deliver ransomware. I'm going to use WinAPI #2 move file X. That's good. And there's other settings you could do. You could do a stage attack. Remember how we talked about, Jason, in earlier on, the person said, hey, what about taxit delay, taxit be stealthy? You could say, you know what, to bypass the sandbox, I want you to wait, 5 minutes or something like that. I might have a FireEye sandbox that waits 5 minutes. I'm going to do that there and go next, right? And be able to launch that attack, right? So the idea here is it allows you to very easily and safely run this in your environment and see if you're susceptible. So I have a report of one I've already done, so we don't have to wait for the whole thing, full kill chain, go to the full report. And there's Fin8, we're gonna go to it. So the beauty here is we talked about this enabling teams from the beginners to the experts. In various ways, you're given summaries, you're given explanations if you want more explanations, so people who are beginners could still understand it better. But you see here across the kill chain, in my environment, the payload went out, went to a laptop. It means it went by my firewall, went by my email gateway, my web gateway, no problem. Opened by the person on their desktop. PowerShell was executed, and then it's yellow, which means it's unsuccessful. It means the endpoint in this situation stopped it, or something in that environment did that. But you could see here, if it continued, you'd see other things that would occur, right? So what's also really important about this is I have a SOAR in this environment. I have a Palo Alto SOAR called XSOAR. It was, remember Demisto? Demisto was the one that became their XSOAR product. And I can actually go ahead and look at the alerts and things. Let's see, oh, sorry, wait a minute. I want to go to the other place here. I want to go to incident response here. And I see, not only do I see from my user interface what was successful, I brought in things from that XSOAR to understand how my XSOAR is working and to see if perhaps it needs to be tuned better. So I see the first thing, here's the playbook. It completed successfully, right? The playbook triggered. This one says waiting. I wonder what that's about. So I want to see that playbook. So it says it's waiting It's waiting for an investigator to manually review the event. Okay, so in this situation here, it's actually okay because it's waiting for someone in the SOC to say, hey, is this okay or not okay? Now, looking at my time, it may be 3 hours later, and the fact that it was waiting, that might not be acceptable. Or in this situation is, that's okay, it's in Adam's queue, he'll get to it, that's fine. You see we have other ones here. And then finally, the last one, there's an error. And what happened here is, in this one here, playbook triggered trying to get incident information, but the way that the XSOR was configured is not actually pulling that information. So we need to optimize our environment. We probably want to change that. So you see here, this is a perfect example. It goes across the entire kill chain. We had a Fin8 example with Rook. So it's an attack. Wants to land and expand. And here we see we're able to go through and check our XSOR environment. Just one of many things we could do to optimize it to see, to fix it better and stuff like that. And you know, when things like this are optimized, in the meantime, the detect goes down, and with the automated playbooks, you could prevent it much easier. So that's a demo. I think we'll take it back for more questions.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Very cool.
Really appreciate you taking us through that.
Cool.
So yeah, let's jump back in some of the questions here before we close out the session. How much collaboration is involved in the testing and setup process between the organization and internal teams?
Say that one more time.
How much collaboration is involved in the testing and setup process between the organization and internal teams? Gotcha.
So the cool part about what we do is very lightweight, and usually we do have post-sales professionals who work with them, but it's very light touch. So the idea is everything from the attacks, the methods, and everything like that have been proven to be safe, even the ones that are updated. So the concept is it's more about us saying, where do we need to be in your environment? What's most important to you, right? And to be able to make sure that that's tested, right? So in some of the breach attack simulation companies, they're actually writing things for you after they find out about your environment. We don't do that. There's no need to do that with us. So ours is much more automated, much more complete, and it's really more about where do we need to be effective, which a lot of our customers really appreciate. So that's kind of important to ask. How long it will be before we're effective. So usually we're able within an hour to come back and give them some initial results and say, here's what we have. Have you seen everything? Have you not seen everything? Do we need to be somewhere else to get more visibility and that kind of thing? Very good question.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Can we populate a report for senior management or non-technical folks based on the results?
Yes, and that's really critical. So beyond having very prescriptive results that say, here's what you need to do to optimize, like, hey, you have, for example, CrowdStrike loaded, but you don't have that feature that goes for the fileless systems. You need to enable that, right? So beyond the technical one, there's also for the executives, the ability to convey risk and say, hey, listen, we ran in the environment, let's say that XSOR example, will come back and say, it looks like you need fine tuning of that to be able to come back in a responsive fashion, right? So it gives the executives the idea of exactly how they did from what they would be interested in. The value, are we operationalized, optimized, that kind of thing.
Dave, just to kind of like continue on that line of questioning a little bit here, I'm sure many people in the audience have this challenge in general, but what suggestions do you can you give, to try and convey that risk to an executive level who don't speak the jargon? I mean, it's something that, we come to time and time again.
Yeah.
We really relay the risk that is out there, but packaging it up in terms that people can truly understand. What advice can you give in that?
So the big thing is obviously, for example, I talked about on the technical side, a fileless attack versus the idea is instead you'd be like, okay, so it would take it up to like, you have an EDR, the EDR needs more fine tuning and the rating would go up 20 points, right? That kind of thing. So the idea is trying to bring it back into a score, by better optimizing your controls, the risk is going to be greatly reduced. The idea also of this, we also have the ability to not only tell you what your score is, but because we're software as a service, relate you to your peers. So let's say it's a financial corporation saying, hey, listen, the EDR needs some major tuning. And by the way, your scores are about 40 points off of what the normal is for financial corporations, right? So we even go into how you do with your peers. And so the concept is they go, oh, well, that's not cool, right? Or the opposite. Healthcare agency has done really well, but the big thing with hospitals is lateral movement's really easy because they don't have a lot of segmentation. So, but in lateral movement, you got this kind of score. But compared to your peers, you're doing way better than they are. And if you do more on the endpoint, and if you do more up front, you should be okay, right? So the idea is it's really trying to let them understand enough about the risk to make investment decisions. And it does give them enough ammo to learn things like a little bit about the kill chain, right? The idea of being able to say it's an EDR issue, it's a lateral movement issue, right? And so just like we're trying to educate those on the lower end of the cybersecurity spectrum, we're also educating those executives in a way too, right? We're not using words like fileless, but again, we're trying to educate them a little bit.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Two final questions here. So the first one, very straightforward. Are you happy to share a copy of the slide deck? We will be providing a recording, everyone, but slide deck, are you happy to share that? Yep.
Absolutely, we'll be happy to share that. And Jason, if you just let me know where to send it, I'll be more happy.
Yeah, of course, no worries. We'll make sure we send that out, folks, with our communication to the attendees. So no worries there. And then the final question, it looks like more of an opinionated question as well, again. But Nathan asked, do you feel that cryptocurrency is emboldened hackers over the last couple of years due to how hashed wallets are seen as more secure and more difficult to trace?
That's a great question, Jason. I think it's a situation, being totally honest, it's if you and I, were working for MI5, MI6 back in the 50s or the CIA, you and I would become really well versed in finding Swiss bank accounts and especially the bounce accounts, right? The idea of multiple corporations, multiple accounts. This is just really a new technology, but a similar best practice in the past. And yes, it does embolden criminals because it makes it easier for them to take advantage of this. Now, in the case of DarkSide last week, they sent the currency out from the American exchange, and the task force was able to get half the money back, right? So it doesn't mean it's bulletproof, right? So there's still things, and I do believe over time that's going to happen in more countries, right? The idea of the capability of interception of these wallets. And again, if you think about it this way, if my hand is wallets, a good hacker is going to start in this wallet and quickly bounce it to other ones to get to them. And the key is right now what we're playing is grab the first finger, right? Grab the wallet as it leaves the host country and bring it back, right? So the key is that with time, the attackers will get better at moving quicker this way. But hopefully the different justice departments, legal departments will be able to go across that way as well. But yes, it's interesting. I think cryptocurrency is something that we'll see what happens to it. But I have to believe that this is going to be a lot of other things in life. I am smart enough to know that the gold standard is no longer around. And so that for me, I remember when I wasn't alive when the gold standard went away. But the point is I think cryptocurrency, people think it's not real. I think it will become real, but I also think it'll become a lot more regulated. So that's a Dave Klein opinion. I'm not sure.
Lovely way to end the session.
Thank you
very much, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
So at this point, I'd love to ask the audience again to join me in a virtual round of applause for wherever you are in front of your screens for Dave. Really appreciate not only the thought leadership, but also taking time to the demo and your candidness with some of those questions as well. Really appreciate that. And thank you again, attendees, for getting the questions in, getting the chat going in the chat box as well. It's really cool to read through. So thank you very much.
Great.